Should there be morality in art? Does morality have any place in art? And when I say morality, I guess what I'm talking about is, in our culture anyway, because morality can mean so many different things to so many different cultures throughout so many different spans of time. But I guess what I'm talking about is traditionally is the Judeo-Christian view of morality. I mean, does the notion, should the ideas about how we should live life, what is the proper way, the right, correct way to live life, what is a good way to live life and what is a bad way to live life, within the framework of Judeo-Christianity, does this have any place in art? Well, clearly it is in art. You can't deny that. It's always had a place in art. Whether it should have a place in art or whether it shouldn't is kind of what I'm addressing now. I mean, a very cursory review. Look at Dante's Divine Comedy. I mean, this is basically a recapitulation of the whole Christian view of things. So it's indistinguishable from morality. However, either because of it or in spite of it, the Divine Comedy is generally considered to be one of the towering works of art of Western European civilization. All of Renaissance art, not all of Renaissance art, that's not true, but obviously a huge, this is what presents itself to me right now, a huge portion of Renaissance painting is its purpose is overtly to glorify the Judeo-Christian ethic. It's kind of, say what you will about Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, it is arguably the greatest work of propaganda ever created, right? I mean, Pope Julius charged Michelangelo with the task of illustrating the Bible, various aspects of the Bible, and mission accomplished. So you can't deny that there is morality in art. I mean, most people couldn't read back in the Renaissance, and so they were inculcated, morally and ethically speaking. Since they couldn't read the Bible, they saw pictures from the Bible. So morality is obviously intimately related to it. You've had composers all throughout history who have performed their music masses. Mozart's Requiem, Brahms's Requiem, Beethoven's Missa Solemnis. I mean, the list goes on. So you have that. What else? Then you have, and these are all, great works of art. I mean, you have to be, an idiot not to consider these great works of art. I mean, you can't just say, oh, they're talking about the Christian myths, so the hell with this stuff. Of course not. So there's no question that morality is intimately related to the creation of art. Then you have other works of art. I mean, there are so many examples. This is such a gray area. Take Moby Dick. Moby Dick is arguably the greatest novel written in English. Now, to me anyway, Moby Dick is not exactly a novel extolling the virtues of Judeo-Christianity. It's a very, very subversive novel. As the novel progresses, you see just how divergent Melville's view of the world is from the traditional view of Christianity, of a loving God, of a compassionate, all-merciful God. I mean, Melville's view is completely different, completely subversive. And yet that's a great work of art. What else? Just off the top of my head, Thomas Hardy. Thomas Hardy, Tess of the D'Urbervilles, is a titanic indictment of conventional Judeo-Christian morality. A lot of his novels are Jude the Obscure. I mean, these are heavy, heavy social commentaries to a large extent against traditional mores, traditional values. And that's certainly a great work of art also. What else? Then you have a writer like Tolstoy, Leo Tolstoy, who went through many phases in his career. At the last stage of Tolstoy's career, he believed that art is intimately involved in morality, that when you create a work of art, it should teach a moral lesson. And he wrote a novella called The Death of Ivan Ilyich, which certainly has heavy moral overtones to it. It in a way, it's almost kind of like a sermon and not a work of art. You could see it that way, perhaps. And yet, whether because or in spite of its morality, The Death of Ivan Ilyich is also a towering work of art. I've actually think so highly of it. I've done a couple of podcasts extolling the virtues of The Death of Ivan Ilyich. So there's no black or white about this subject at all. I guess the question is this. I mean, look, there are as many different views of life as there are writers, right? Some writers believe in God, some writers don't. Some writers believe in the whole Judeo-Christian thing, others don't. And they can all potentially create great works have created great works of art. So I guess what it really boils down to make a long story short, because this is such an open-ended subject, to me anyway, it's not so much the issue of whether morality should be in art, but rather it's the question of how is that morality discussed in an artistic point of view. In other words, it's not so much for me the content of a work of art. It's the form in which it's written. It's the artistry which goes into it. I mean, any jerk can tell you that, God exists and we should be religious. Or any jerk can tell you that God doesn't exist and so we shouldn't be religious, Everyone's got their opinions about things. So it's not so much what your opinion about something is, it's how you can express it. Do you express it convincingly in a work of fiction? Remember, a work of art is not a polemic either. It's not an essay. A work of art is a world which is created with fictional characters, and each of these fictional characters should be a three-dimensional character, and not just a flat one-dimensional or two-dimensional character, which is simply a mouthpiece for the author to foist upon the reader his pet ideas about life. That's not what a work of art is. So the question for me is, how well in fiction does the author succeed in creating a three-dimensional world in which each of the characters has their own point of view? That's the main thing for me. And so in a way, the issue of morality for me is kind of irrelevant. I could just as easily read a book which is infused with some kind of religious sentiment, as long as it's written in a brilliant way, as much as I could read a book by a confirmed atheist. Again, for me, it's more about the craft of writing than it is about the ideas which are being extolled in the book. Now, when somebody who is writing something is explicitly ramming his or her ideas down your throat, whatever they might be, well, I think that you have to just decide for yourself when the author is crossing the line between creating a real work of fiction, an imaginary world composed of sentences and paragraphs which are expressed in some kind of a beautiful way. You have to decide for yourself when the author has crossed the line and has decided to make his so-called work of art a glorified soapbox on which he climbs up and simply dumps his ideas on you. When the author has crossed the line and done that, well, it ceases to be a work of art. At that point, it just becomes a work of propaganda. Whether it's religious propaganda, whether it's political propaganda, whatever kind. Again, this is a gray area. I mean, I think of a book like The Grapes of Wrath. Now, The Grapes of Wrath is clearly a book whose sympathies lie in socialism. We know that John Steinbeck was an avowed socialist, and it's pretty plain, without even doing any research on who John Steinbeck was, that this book loves socialism. However, at the same time, I can't just dismiss The Grapes of Wrath for being a socialistic, idealistic, a socialistic soapbox. Because the characters are all three-dimensional. It's extremely well written. You do enter into the world that John Steinbeck wants you to enter into. But for me personally, this work of art is marred by the heavy-handedness, with which Steinbeck treats his pet project of socialism. Now, as I say, the job of a successful novelist is to create a hermetically sealed-off world populated by three-dimensional characters who have actual feelings and thoughts, and who are not simply mouthpieces for the author to express his own pet peeves. A character should have a life of its own. The writer shouldn't say, okay, I'm going to make one of my characters say this to illustrate a point that I want to make. In other words, I guess what I'm saying is an author should not meddle or interfere with a character which he has created. He should let that character run its course. He should allow that character to just play himself out in the novel. The author shouldn't be heavy-handed and at a certain point in the novel say, okay, I'm going to make the character say this now because this is what I believe. Once the author starts doing that, he's no longer an artist. He's simply a propagandist, an ideologue, or a moralist. And I don't know about you, but I do not like people shoving their ideas down my throat. And I am very, very sensitive to that when that occurs in a book, if it occurs in a book. Some of us are not as sensitive about it, but I am. And I don't like it. So that's it. I mean, it's kind of a tricky thing. You have to know when, most important of all, you have to know when the author is being a real craftsperson. If the author actually has a love of language and a facility with language, because, the lifeblood of any work of art is not ideas. The lifeblood of a work of art is the stuff of which it is made. A novel is made of words and sentences and paragraphs. Music is made of notes. Painting is made of pigments. If you're painting a picture, you can't just say, "Oh, I like the color blue, so I'm going to put some blue in here." You can't do that. You can do that, but it's going to be stupid. You have to put whatever color is in that the picture requires. You have to leave your ego out of it. And once the author inserts his ego artificially into the work of art or into the picture, well, then he's not doing his job anymore. And although this is a very gray area to talk about, the part about it which is not that gray to me, which is very clear about what has happened to art right now as I'm speaking, this is very clear to me. Art has become a mockery. It's no longer art. All art that's created nowadays, I'm thinking specifically of visual arts, painting, well visual arts, but is basically ideology now. Art nowadays, in this new postmodern, global, woke world of ours, is all about using art as a form of social commentary, or as a form of ideology to ram down our throats. That's what it's morphed into, and nothing more. I mean, if you listen to people talk about art nowadays, specifically painting, what do they talk about? They talk about how an artist is exploring gender identity. It's like, it's as if that's it. That's what art has become synonymous with. Social commentary and pushing certain social agendas. And again, to me, this is a mockery of art. This is not art at all. I mean, nowadays, you would actually think that an artist, a writer, a painter, is nothing more than a glorified social worker, using paint or words as tools in order to stuff a certain social message down our throats. They're glorified social workers now. That's what it's become. So that part I'm very clear about. The morality and the ideology, which is in so-called art these days, has completely eclipsed the true nature of art. Nowadays, art must serve a purpose. It must be strictly utilitarian. And that comes across. It must be utilitarian. It must benefit society in some ways. It's very heavy-handed in the way it does that. It's kind of ridiculous, and as I say, it's not really art. It's such a gross distortion. I mean, there was morality in Renaissance painting, but the actual paintings that were executed were done by people who were geniuses at painting, who were geniuses at depicting the human form, geniuses at using color, geniuses at showing a harmonious visual experience. Well, that's all gone now. There's no more craft in art, and you're not even supposed to have it. It's very low down on the totem pole. If you want to be an artist now, the most important thing that you have to do is ram your pet idea or the idea of the zeitgeist down the throats of your audience. That's kind of it. And craft has nothing to do with it. So I'm very clear about what art is now. What else do I want to say about this subject? The only thing more I can add about it, again, it's so open-ended, is that my own personal point of view, I find I am one of those people who was more an art for art's sake kind of person. I find that the notion of utilitarianism in art is an odious one to me. I mean, if the only reason or the dominant reason for creating a work of art is to serve some utilitarian purpose, well, I think this is an extremely low level of thinking. To see things in strictly utilitarian terms is to have tunnel vision and to rule out or to prevent oneself from seeing the intricacy and the complexity and the beauty of life. If one only chooses to create a work of art with the specific idea of ramming some morality or ideology down our throats, well, it's kind of like a person walking down the street and filtering out. It's like a young man walking down the street and filtering out any human being who isn't a very attractive blonde between the ages of 20 and 21, with big breasts and with wide hips. What about the rest of humanity walking down that street? He doesn't care about that. He filters it out. It doesn't exist for him. Well, the same can be true of people who create art with a specific agenda in mind. They're not really addressing life. They're just addressing their ideas and their ego. I guess all I can say is that you'll know, if you're a sensitive person, you'll know when somebody has abandoned art in favor of ideology and in favor of morality, and only morality and only ideology. You'll know it when they cross the line. I hope. Thanks.